was about a fella that was driving down a country road, and all of a sudden I looked out, and there beside him was a chicken. He was doing about 45, and the chicken was running alongside. So he stepped on the gas, he got it up to about 60, and the chicken caught up with him and was right beside him again. And then he thought, as he was looking at him, that the chicken had 3 legs. But before he could really make up his mind for sure, the chicken took off out in front of him at 60 miles an hour and turned down a lane into a barnyard. Well, he made a quick turn and went down into the barnyard too, and there was a farmer standing there. And he asked him, he said, did a chicken come past you? And he said, yeah. Well, he said, am I crazy, or did the chicken have 3 legs? And he says, yep, it's mine. He says, I breed 3-legged chickens. And the fellow said, for heaven's sakes, why? Well, he says, I like the drumstick, Ma likes the drumstick, and now the kid likes the drumstick, and we just got tired of fighting for him. And the driver said, well, how does it taste? He says, I don't know. I've never been able to catch one. It happens to be a story of an older preacher who was talking to a young preacher who hadn't had as much experience, and he said to him, you know, sometimes on Sunday morning they begin to nod off. And he says, I found a way to wake them up. He says, right in my sermon, when I see them beginning to doze, I say, last night I held in my arms a woman who was the wife of another man. And he said, that wakes them up. And he says, then, when they look at me startled, I say, it was my dear mother. On his way to a mountain resort, and a policeman stopped him and said, did you know that you're driving without taillights? And the driver hopped out of the car. He was so badly shaken that the officer took pity on him and said, well, now, wait a minute, calm down. It's not that serious an infraction. The fellow said, it may not mean much to you, but to me it means I've lost my trailer, a wife, and 4 kids. And on the last day in Ireland, I was taken to Cashel Rock. I didn't know at that time that it's only 25 miles from Ballyporeen. But I do know that the young Irish guide who was showing us around the ruins of the ancient cathedral there on the rock finally took us to the little cemetery. And we walked with great interest and looked at those ancient tombstones and the inscriptions. And then we came to one. And the inscription said, remember me as you pass by, for as you are, so once was I. But as I am, you too will be, so be content to follow me. And that was too much for the Irish wit and humor of someone who came after, because underneath was scratched, to follow you I am content. I wish I knew which way you went. It's a true story, I understand, about a newspaper photographer out in Los Angeles. He was called in by his editor and told of a fire that was raging out there in Palos Verdes. That's a hilly area in south of Los Angeles, a lovely residential area. His assignment was to rush down to a small airport, board a waiting plane, get some pictures of the fire, and be back in time for the afternoon edition. Well, he raced down the freeway. He broke the law all the way. He got to the airport and drove his car to the end of the runway, and sure enough, there was a plane waiting with the engines all revved up, ready to go. He got aboard, and at about 5,000 feet, he began getting his camera out of the bag, told his fellow flying the plane to get him over the fire so he could get his pictures and get back to the paper. And from the other side of the cockpit, there was a deafening silence. And then he heard these words, "Aren't you the instructor?" You know, those people who place their bets on someone other than you is a little bit like the fellow that was going to the races. And for 3 nights, he dreamed of the number 5. So when he got to the track, he opened a program to the 5th race, and he looked down to the number 5 horse. And the horse's name was 5 by 5. Well, that did it. He bet the whole bundle on that horse, number 5 in the 5th race. And the horse came in 5th. You know, there's a story about a pig and a chicken. They got tired of farm life, decided to find jobs in town. They no sooner arrived in town when the chicken spotted a sign in the window of a restaurant. It said ham and eggs, $1.25. The chicken suggested they go in and apply. And the pig said, wait a minute. For you, this job only requires a contribution. For me, it's a total commitment. It is a story about an elderly couple who were getting ready for bed one night, and she said, "Oh, I just am so hungry for ice cream, and there isn't any in the house." And he said, "I'll get some." "Oh," she said, "you're a dear." And she said, "Vanilla with chocolate sauce." He says, "Vanilla with chocolate." So she said, "Write it down. Now you'll forget, dear." He said, "I won't forget." She said, "Some whipped cream on top." And he said, "Vanilla with chocolate sauce, whipped cream on top." And she said, "And a cherry." And he said, "And a cherry on top." Oh, she said, "Please write it down. I know you'll forget." He said, "I won't forget. Vanilla with chocolate sauce, whipped cream, and a cherry on top." And away he went. By the time he got back, she was already in bed. He handed her the paper bag. She opened it, and there was a ham sandwich. And she said, "I told you to write it down. You forgot the mustard."
Three fellows that went out of the building to get in their car and found they'd locked the keys in. They were locked out. And one of them said, "Get a wire coat hanger and we can straighten it out and I can get the..." And the other one says, "You can't do that. Somebody think we're stealing the car." And the third one said, "Well, we better do something pretty quick because it's raining, starting to rain and the top's down."
About the parent with the two children and two sons, and one of them was a dyed-in-the-wool pessimist and the other one was an incurable optimist. And they thought they were both so unrealistic that they talked to a psychiatrist about it, and he said he thought he could solve the problem. And they said, "Well, what?" Well, he said, "Let's get the most magnificent set of toys any boy ever had, and we'll put him in a room. We'll take the pessimist there, and then we'll turn him loose, and when he sees those toys and knows they're all for him, he'll get over being a pessimist." Well, he said, "What are you going to do about the optimist?" Well, he said, "I have a friend who's got a racing stable, and he said we can get quite a quantity of what they clean out of the stable, and we'll put that in another room, and when the optimist has seen his brother get those toys, and then he gets that, he'll get over being an optimist." Well, they did it. Finally, after a period, they then went in and followed in where the boy was with the toys, and he was sitting there crying, and they said, What are you crying about?" He said, "Well, I know somebody's going to come and take these away from me." And they went down to the room with the optimist, and he was on that top of that pile of stuff, and he was throwing it over his shoulder as fast as he could, and they said, "What are you doing?" He says, "There's got to be a pony in here somewhere." Was an agent overseas and happened to be in Ireland, and there was an emergency, and it was necessary to contact him immediately. So they called in another agent, and they said, "Now you'll go there. His name is Murphy, and your recognition will be to say, 'Tis a fair day, but it'll be lovelier this evening.'" So he went to Ireland, a little town in Ireland, into the pub, elbowed himself up to the bar, ordered a drink, and then said to the bartender, how would I get in touch with Murphy?" And the bartender says, "Well, if it's Murphy the farmer you want, it's 2 miles down the road and it's the farm on the left." He said, "If it's Murphy the bootmaker, he's on the second floor of the building across the street." And he says, "My name is Murphy." So he picked up the drink and he said, "Well, 'tis a fair day, but it'll be lovelier this evening." "Oh," he said, "it's Murphy the spy you want." Well, he